Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for Her Worship the Mayor and colleagues.
Good morning, everyone. Can you please remain standing for prayers by my chaplain, Father Michael Phillips, before we start the meeting?
Very good morning to you. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we ask for your blessing upon this meeting, that you guide everyone who speaks and guide the decisions that are made. Increase in us your gift of faith, that forsaking what lies behind and reaching out to that which is before, we may run in the direction that you command, and so win the crown of everlasting life. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Please be seated. I know. I'd like to remind you that this council meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so please be aware we're all on camera. You may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. There is no need for members to stand as the cameras are focused on people sitting down. Can you remember to speak clearly into your microphones, please? I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting today, councillors, officers, members of the press and public, anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. Can you make sure all mobile phones are on silent, please, and other noisy devices also be put on silent? If there's an emergency alarm, follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic car park. If we have any motions or amendments during the meeting, I will need them to be clear, please, before we go to the vote. Agenda item 1, attendance. The attendance register is going around the room. Please, can all members sign it and send it on? Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Lead Officer for Council, Richard Quinnell, have we had any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Giles Davis, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Calvin Harnett, Councillor John Cunningham, Councillor Mary Barnett and Councillor Nigel Davis.
Thank you. Members, are there any other apologies?
Councillor Keith James.
Councillor Michael Harris.
Councillor Len Constance.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Monitoring Officer Linda Willis, do you have any advice for members, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In fact, we've already had a conversation because you've alerted me to the fact that you want to declare personal, not prejudicial interest in the agenda item on the skin piercing bylaws. One of your close relatives is the owner of a tattoo studio. And then, more generally, members, we have at item 12 a report from the Independent Remuneration Panel. And although the report is only there for alerting members to the fact that they can contribute to the consultation, it nevertheless is a matter that we need to consider whether you need to declare, and it's our normal practice that you all declare a personal but not prejudicial interest as it affects your salaries or potentially affects your salaries and allowances. So if I can ask you to say you're all agreed with that. Thank you, members, and thank you, Madam Mayor.
Members, do you have any other interest to declare? No? Agenda item 4, minutes of the 23rd of September 2014. Can someone move that the minutes are correct? Are we all agreed? Thank you, members. The minutes are agreed. Agenda item 5, update on actions. Members, the updates on what has been done to implement our previous decisions start on page 39 of the agenda. Are there any comments or questions? No. Everyone happy to move the updates? Yes. Thank you, members. They are noted. Agenda item 6, receipt of petitions. We have 3 petitions for today. Colin Clark, can you come down and read out your petition about resurfacing on Manor Way Road, Abersycon, and then pass it along to me, please?
Madam Mayor, I have a petition here to for us to resurface the Manor Way Road, Abersycon. The potholes are so bad that we and our children are at risk of having an accident sooner or later unless the road is made safe. We are all concerned citizens who urge our leaders to act now to make this road as safe as possible by the complete resurfacing of the road. I have the signatories on here are every person on Manor Way. So I can present it to you and perhaps you can make it a priority.
Thank you very much. Petition contains 38 signatures. The Executive Member for Neighbourhoods is not here today, so we are all happy to refer it to the Chief Officer of Neighbourhoods for the Executive Member to investigate, respond and report back. Yeah. Okay, Christina. Thank you. Cheryl Downs, can you come down and read out your petition about removing personal items from graves and then pass it to me, please? I understand you're being accompanied to the front table by Councillor Haynes.
We, the undersigned, demand Torfaen Council to stop removing items off graves. The recent decision to clear graves was heartless, upsetting, and it has hurt many people. The policy has not been enforced before. It is cruel to suddenly enforce it. Shame on Torfaen Council.
Petition contains 134 signatures. Thank you. The Executive Member for Neighbourhoods is not here today, so are we all happy to refer it to the Chief Officer for Neighbourhoods for the Executive Member to investigate, respond and report back? Yes? Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Mrs Downs. Mrs Ros Morgan, can you come down and read out your petition about saving Pontypool settlement and then pass it along to me, please?
This petition is for all users, potential users, discarded users and those with a real interest to express their utter dismay at the development of Pontypool Settlement. It was definitely set up as an adult education centre as early as 1935. We insist that we wish the settlement to revert to its full, valuable and correct usage, whilst also publicising and encouraging other bodies to value its existence, thereby hugely widening its scope. We appreciate that there is a need for financial cutbacks and believe that this action by Torfaen County Borough Council is short-sighted, especially in view of the obvious wastage over the last few weeks alongside the unnecessary spending. Madam Mayor, could I just read this, because this is relevant as well? Please be aware that the Save the Settlement Committee are delivering this petition on the 16th of October as our protest regarding the Council's sudden arrangements to take over the entire floor of the settlement. We are most concerned for our future use of the centre in our local community. This relates to the demise of the whole north of Torfaen, as all the local residents will be completely without any educational or leisure facilities. We feel that the health and welfare of the services users will be compromised, especially users such as classes as independent living skills, and will cost Torfaen County Borough Council many thousands of pounds in the future when they have to provide services to housebound who have no stimulation. We urge you to ensure that all councillors are aware of this petition, especially those who represent North Gwent and who should be worried as we are. We will, of course, expect a response within a month. The address to the respondent, to the chairman of our Save the Settlement Subcommittee.
Thank you. The petition contains 394 signatures. Are we all happy to refer it to the Executive Member for Education for him to investigate, respond and report back? Yes? Thank you, Councillor Yule. Thank you. Agenda item 7, public question time. There are 2 public questions for today, shown on the sheet circulated. Can I ask Terry Brown to come down and ask his question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Borda. As a result of highway maintenance resurfacing work over many years, Tipuca Road now has an issue with the height of its curbstones. As the highway has been increased in level, so the curbstones that run parallel with the main road have decreased in height and become inefficient to surface water drainage and measures and pedestrian safety issue. The surface water runs off the main road, misses a number of highway drainage gullies, and the consequence flows over the top of the key curbstones and into residents' driveways and front gardens. As the height difference between the highway and the curbstones is now minimal, so irresponsible vehicles, drivers are now mounting the pavement to negotiate oncoming traffic, thereby putting lives of pedestrians at risk. On behalf of the residents of Tipuca Road, what is the Council going to do to help solve this ongoing issue once and for all?
Thank you very much. Leader, would you like to answer this question, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This question will be answered on behalf of John Cunningham, who's got a bereavement in the family, and indeed there's a couple of other questions as well that will be answered. So the answer is Tipuca Road has not been resurfaced for at least 20 years. However, in recent past, a thin surface treatment has been applied, but this would not have affected significantly the height of the curb. Therefore, the layout of Tipuca Road, which includes the number of drop curb accesses to properties, has remained unchanged. During normal wet weather conditions, water does not flow into the residents' garden as the main gradient falls away from the properties. However, it is acknowledged that the recent extreme flooding event of May the 22nd may well have resulted that some water has flowed into residents' gardens. Whilst the curb height is lower than newly constructed curbs, there remained a clear boundary between the carriageway and the footway to enable the safe movement of traffic. In terms of the concerns raised relating to the risk of collision, I would refer back to the previous correspondence on this matter, where it's been confirmed that there has been no recorded personal injury collision in this area for at least 5 years. Therefore, I can conclude that the highway in this location is functional and a new curb line is not required. Whilst this may be desirable, the Council at this time does not have the resources to carry out such work and does not plan to carry out any work at this location in the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Have you a supplementary question?
That is worth it now, I don't know. This particular issue has been problematic for many years. Why is it taking Torvine County Borough so long to address this and the concern of the residents? The actual height of the curb is ½ inch outside my house for a good 50 yards. So if that's not workable, if that's the height that a highway has got to have, so be it.
Can I ensure our colleague here that officers from that department will visit again and look at the road and respond in writing?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you. Second question is from Mr. Tony Evans. Would you like to come down and ask your question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Although Councillor Cunningham, Executive Member of the Neighbourhoods, has reported to the Council that there has been no recorded personal injury collisions or casualties on Teapucker Road within the last 5 years, residents have either witnessed or heard of numerous unreported road traffic accidents occur on frequent basis. Indeed, many of Teapucker Road residents have succumbed personal damage to their own parked vehicles. Unfortunately, not all road traffic accidents are reported to the police. However, when an accident does occur, vehicle drivers exchange information themselves to claim through their insurance companies. With the added information from Teapucker Road residents that unreported minor and major accidents do actually take place on a frequent basis, what permanent speed reduction measures are the Council going to introduce to make Teapucker Road a safer place? Or is Teapucker Road continuing to be a dangerous road?
Leader, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, again, I'll answer this on behalf of Councillor Cunningham. In considering a response to this question, I'd like to reiterate the principles Councillor Cunningham responded at the last Council. Welsh Government is clear that the funding for road safety engineering schemes that they give to local authorities should be targeted at reducing recorded casualty figures. Whilst we are conscious of those areas where there is significant history of damage-only collision, given the limited funding available, our policy has to be toward road casualty information. I'd also like to reiterate that the speed data gathered by the Department and Gwent Police does not show excessive speed at this location. Whilst I note Mr Evans makes reference to the occurrence of damages on collisions, on Teapucker Road, these figures are not considered excessive and are not unique to Teapucker Road and this experience on all other roads across the county borough. As such, I would reiterate to the Council could not support any road safety engineering interventions at this location.
Mr Evans, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes. Can Councillor Cunningham explain, despite witnessing himself approximately 1 year ago a serious road traffic accident on Teapucker Road involving 2 vehicles and a street lamppost, the attendance of the police and the ambulance service crews, and indeed 3/4 of T Pooker Road residents, he does not recognise there has a problem associated with speeding vehicles on T Pooker Road.
Again, as I say, Councillor Cunningham has got a bereavement in the family, and he'll write to you with an answer appropriately.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you for the questions. We'll move on to agenda item 8, announcements. Leader, do you have any announcements today?
No announcements, Madam Mayor.
Chief Executive, do you have any announcements?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to remind people, especially for those who may be watching via the webcasting, that we do have a series of roadshows to consult the public on the budget this week. The What Matters to You roadshows, when we will go through in some detail what our budget is likely to be over the coming year, and to ask the public for their views and consult them. And obviously whatever comes out of those roadshows will be an important part of members' considerations for setting the budget for next year. So, Madam Mayor, the meetings are tonight at Blaenavon Primary School, tomorrow at Pontypool Civic Centre, and Thursday, Cwmbran Stadium. Each of the meetings will start at 6:30 and last to approximately 8:30 in the evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Move on to the next agenda item 9, reducing residual waste capacity. I understand that before we have the presentation, the leader would like to come in.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to make a comment, and it's appropriate I do it before this discussion, before this item is raised. Before members decide on the proposals being presented, I want to reiterate the position regarding the food waste liners. If liners were provided, this would cost a further 30k per annum to the Council, and there is currently no evidence to show that these liners improve recycling performance. However, the Clean and Scrutiny Committee supported the introduction of food liners. It is therefore recommended that officers consider how these liners can be funded through sponsorship or other sources of external funding. This work will then be presented at a later date to members of the Council.
Thank you. Christina Harry, Chief Officer for Neighbourhood Services, can you present your report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good morning, members. You have a comprehensive report within your papers this morning that takes you from pages 42 to 234. In an attempt to make that easier for you to navigate, what we've done this morning is present the key messages from that report in a presentation for you. I'll give the introduction and I'll sum up the report, and then Dana will outline the process that we've undertaken to reach this position today throughout the summer. So in terms of the background, why are we here in terms of making this decision this morning? Members are well rehearsed of the background to waste management in Wales. There are key European drivers and also Welsh Government policies that are in place that really are asking local authorities in Wales to seek to reduce landfill wherever possible and maximise recycling. If we don't do that, Welsh Government have made it very clear that they will impose penalty fines on local authorities who do not meet those targets. So clearly, we have done a lot already. We are currently recycling at about 52%. We've undertaken a lot of work at the curbside in offering a lot more recycling materials for our public to recycle at the curbside. But clearly, to get us from 52% to 70%, we need to do something quite radical. And clearly the status quo will not get us there. And in order to avoid those penalty fines, we need to do something, particularly around our residual waste capacity. Members, in responding to the European and Welsh Government legislations, have made waste management one of your corporate plan priorities, and officers, in response to that corporate plan priority, have put together a waste strategy which has been endorsed and approved by Council as policy. That strategy is called Wise About Waste, and what it seeks to do is to get us to 70% through maximising recycling opportunities. So I'll hand over to Dana now to take you through the process we've gone through as officers to engage people with this item through the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Yes, morning, members. As Christina said, this council signed up to a waste strategy, and within that waste strategy, we've always said that we would need to come back and look at our residual waste. And by residual waste, I mean the black bin. the black wheelie bin. We provide a comprehensive service at the curbside. That most materials that can be recycled we collect at the curbside from our residents. But we know that there is still material in the black bins that should be recycled and could be recycled. We know this because we do participation monitoring and we drive around the borough and we see what's in the black bins. And we also know this from some composition analysis that we've had done. And the graph that I put on the screen there, which is in the report for you, actually shows the material that we could capture, which is the light blue line, if you like, and then the dark blue line is what we are actually capturing. And so what that shows us is there is more material out there that we can capture from these black bins. Obviously, the bottom two lines, that was a service we rolled out earlier this year, so we are now capturing those elements. We also know, because it's Welsh Government good practice and other authorities have already done this, that an effective means of driving up recycling rate is to reduce the size of the black bin or to reduce capacity of the black bin by some of the means. A number of authorities have already pursued it. I'll cover it off again a little bit later in the presentation. But again, this chart, which again is in the report, this shows all of the materials that can be recycled and that we collect at the curbside. The green ones, are the ones that we collect at the curbside. The red bar is nappies, which we're proposing to collect at the curbside under our new system. And if you tot up all of those numbers, that's about 80%. So 80% of the material that people produce can be recycled. We just need to divert it from the black bin into the correct containers. So knowing that we had to do this, we went to Welsh Government and said, you're telling us it's best practice. How do we go about this? How can we reduce our residual capacity? And will it really work for us in Torfaen? They appointed an independent consultant to work with us through RAP. I don't propose to go through that consultant's report in the presentation today because it's been well discussed at previous meetings that we've had. But we ended up essentially with some options that we wanted to consult on. And we took those through scrutiny twice, once in April and then again in May, and we had a member seminar in May. And throughout the whole of the month of June, we then consulted on these three options. And our consultation was through MySay, which is electronic. We had road shows where members of staff could talk to members of the public. We wrote out to our People's Panel. We made great use of our social media. We had articles in Torfaen Talks. We spoke to town and community councils. We spoke to our registered social landlords. And we obviously had some media coverage at the time through the BBC. Once we had the results of that consultation, we took it back into scrutiny in July and back into a member seminar in September to give the results of that consultation. So just a quick reminder of what we consulted on. What we effectively asked people was, we need to make this change, but we have a choice about how we make that change. And so we gave people a choice of effectively three. Keeping the existing black wheelie bin that we have and going to a monthly collection, replacing the big wheelie bin we have now with a smaller wheelie bin, which we call the skinny bin, or going to a bag system where we collected 2 bags every fortnight. And for each of these options, we said we would need to introduce a new service, a dedicated service for people with nappies, because we recognise that families with nappies or children in nappies need a little bit extra capacity. So that's what we consulted on. We also asked the public, what are you doing now, and what more could we do to help you recycle? We made some assumptions when we consulted, and just a reminder of those assumptions. We assumed that we wouldn't be charging for green waste collections. A number of authorities charge for green waste collections, and we know from their experience that when you introduce a charge for something that has previously been free, the amount of take-up in that then drops off. Now, green waste is something that counts towards our recycling. So to us, it seems a bit counterintuitive to charge for something and then have a fall-off in that provision of that in that waste, which will then count against us in our targets when we're trying to reach targets and avoid significant fines. We also assumed that we would have to provide extra allowance at Christmas, around the Christmas period. Everyone produces more waste in the Christmas period, whether it's food waste, whether it's from toy packaging or wherever it is. So we know we are going to have to do something at Christmas time, and we will make allowance for that. Picking up on the comment the leader made at the beginning, the officer recommendation is that we don't provide food liners at this time. It's quite expensive to do, and we won't get a massive return for that expenditure. It's been estimated about 1.35% is what we'll get as an increase, but that's for an ongoing cost of about £30,000 a year, every year, and that cost will go up as time goes on. But what we will do is we'll look to see whether or not we can find a cost-neutral means of providing this, either through sponsorship or some other form of funding. Everything else will remain the same. So this is only about the black bin, only about the black bin. And we will need to come back to Council about an enforcement policy. Our approach has always been, and will continue to be, that we will always seek to educate, raise awareness and help people along the road to recycling. However, we will need to have something at the end of that road, an enforcement policy, should all our other efforts fail. So this is what we were told. This is what the consultation told us. 74% of the public were very clear that they would prefer to have the skinny bin. They would prefer to keep a fortnightly collection but go to a smaller bin. The crews preferred the bags, but that was for ease of operation for them. And our consultation was representative. When we look at all of the population of Torfaen over 16, we needed to get a response of just over 1,000 people to make it representative, and we have nearly 1,500 responses. So we can be 95% confident that this is representative of our population. And all of the comments that we received as part of that consultation, we have analysed all of those comments. Some of them I'll be talking about today, and we'll be acting upon them going forward as part of this project. The map's not very clear, I apologise for that, but that is the spread of the responses we had. So not only was the number representative, but the spread across the borough was also representative. We also asked people what they currently do now. And this is a little bit like when you go to the doctor and the doctor asks you about how much you drink and how much exercise you get. You tend to tell the doctor what you think it is he wants to hear or what you should be doing. So this is what people told us. They told us that 94% say that they currently use the black box. Now we know, again, from our participation monitoring, that only half of the people in Torfaen use their box on a regular basis. So yes, people may be using the box, but not as often as they could. 88% of people claim to use the blue bag for cardboard. 86 use the green service, the green waste service. 75% use the brown caddy for food. So clearly, people are less likely to want to recycle their food. And only 4% of people actually admitted that they didn't recycle at all. In terms of, we asked people what else we could do to help them to recycle, and we also asked them what concerns they might have around the proposals. And there were a number of concerns and comments, which I've gone into a little bit more detail in the report, but just very, very briefly, some people were concerned about family size, so where there were larger families, how would they cope with a smaller bin? We currently provide extra capacity for families of 6 or more, and we will continue to do that going forward, so that's not going to change. We had some comments, operational comments. Some of those were requests for containers, queries about nets. Some of them were complaints about the way the crews had performed, and we took those on board. 6% of people that commented wanted to keep things as it stands now. They didn't want any change at all. A number of people made suggestions for how we could expand our collections. Interestingly, a number of the items they suggested that we collect, we currently do collect. So what that told us was we need to do a little bit more in terms of raising awareness with people around what we can currently collect at the curbside. There was a concern around fly tipping. People were worried that if we introduce this system, there'll be an increase in our fly tipping. The experience elsewhere, where other councils have done this, is that there is an initial increase in fly tipping for about a month, possibly 2, but after that it does go back down to pre-implementation levels. We don't have any reason to believe that Torfaen will be very different to other authorities in Wales. Pests was a concern. This is more around the bag option and also around side waste. The recommendation in the council report is that we go for skinny bin. So some of those concerns will be allayed because the system will be different. Enforcement, people were frustrated that we just couldn't fine people for not recycling, but unfortunately the law didn't allow us to do that. People asked about having better boxes, and again, this was something picked up by scrutiny, and we are going to look into that as a separate project going forward. Only 4% of people actually said food caddy liners, having liners with the food caddies would encourage them to recycle more. So there wasn't a massive groundswell of opinion from the public to say that they would want liners. Some people were unhappy about the consultation itself. They wanted an option D, which was none of the above. But we tried to be clear that this consultation was never about, should we make this change? This consultation was about, we have to make this change. How do we make the change? Which would be the most palatable option? Some people saw this as a reduction in service. Actually, with the recommendation we're going forward with, which is the fortnight collection of the smaller bin, plus a new service for nappies, there is no reduction in service. In fact, there's an increase in service for the nappies. And we received 4% positive comments about the service overall. So we went to scrutiny. The initial view of scrutiny before we went out to consultation was that we should provide food caddy liners. They felt very strongly about that. They agreed that we shouldn't charge for green. They agreed with the other assumptions that I've gone through, and they felt the three options were the right ones to consult on. When we went back to scrutiny after our consultation, they supported the view of residents that we should recommend the skinny bins. It's the 140-litre bin. They asked us to look at different boxes, which we've agreed to do as a separate project, and obviously communication is going to be absolutely key going forward, which we accept and we acknowledge. I mentioned earlier that lots of other authorities have done this or have started to do it. Monmouth Council was the very first council in Wales to do this. They introduced a restriction, that they have a bag system, and they introduced a restriction in the number of bags they would collect from their residents last July. And almost immediately they saw a huge jump in the amount of extra recycling they were collecting. They went from 50% to 63%, and they're currently at 68%. So if you put that in the context of needing to reach a target of 70%, they're already there. The table I'm showing you there, the chart there, was taken from a report we've recently had from Monmouth. They had a report commissioned by RAP again to see, well, did it work? I mean, anecdotally they felt that it had, but they wanted statistical evidence to show that it had. And what that chart is showing you, if you look at the two bars at the very beginning of that chart, which are grey, that was the amount of residual or black waste that they were collecting, and it is halved. It's actually more than halved since they've introduced this change, but there are corresponding increases in the other types of material that they collect, the recyclate material, most notably food. People were more likely to recycle their food, and also nappies, because they had an existing nappy service. Just of note, just to make the point that I made earlier around the green waste, the green bars, at the same time that they restricted their residual waste, Monmouth also introduced a charge for the green garden waste. And what you'll see there is a massive drop in the amount, almost two-thirds actually, in the amount of material that residents then presented to them, which is why we don't think we should be charging for green. But it is something that this council will need to endorse, particularly in line of the current budget. Other authorities, Denbighshire are going for the skinny bin, Newport have gone for a smaller bin, Cardiff have consulted but they've not made a decision yet, Swansea have introduced a bag restriction, Merthyr are going for the skinny bin, Gwynedd have gone to 3-weekly collection, and Blaen y Gwent are either looking at a 3-weekly collection or going for the skinny bin. And those are just the ones that have been made public. We know that a lot of the authorities, nearly every authority in Wales, is considering this issue because it's good practice and it will drive up recycling rates. A quick reminder of the costs, and these were provided to the public when we consulted, so we shared with the public exactly what the costs would be. Every single one of these options, the three, will save us money, some more than others, year on year, because the disposal of the material is less and disposal is very expensive. And there are one-off set-up costs for each of these. Some are more expensive than others. The option that we're proposing is the skinny bin, and you'll see it's got quite high set-up costs. That's because we need to buy in the skinny bins. In terms of how we'll fund those, we have looked at grant funding. Unfortunately, there is no grant funding available to us at the moment. So what we're going to propose is that we take the saving that we're going to make from introducing the service and then use that to borrow to then pay for the bins over a period of time. In terms of what we do next, we've got quite a lot of work to do once the decision is made. We have to procure some new vehicles, some new recycling vehicles and some new food and cardboard vehicles. We obviously need to buy the new skinny bins. We also need to get different types of recycling container. We always have a stock of these, but we know we're going to get requests for more, particularly food caddies we expect and black boxes, so we'll make sure we've got a good stock of those in. We will have to look at rerouting some of our rounds. Now this won't affect, or our intention is it won't affect the public, it won't affect the residents. They will still get the same service on the same day, but it'll just be perhaps a different crew. We'll have to have a look at our rounds because we know there'll be more material for them to collect. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be coming back to you on an enforcement policy. We're going to start implementation once the decision is made. It will take us throughout 2015 to fully implement this. A lot of it will depend on the lead-in times for vehicles and containers, but we can get onto that straight away. And we're quite confident that we can have this fully rolled out by September of 2015. The next big target year for us is 15-16, and we have to get to 58%. So this will be coming in during that very crucial year. And obviously, as I've already mentioned, lots and lots of communication, education and awareness, not only during the implementation, but in advance. And in fact, as of tomorrow, and rolling on for a week or two, we've got a number of road shows already planned where we can start talking to people following the decision that's made today.
Thank you, Dana. Just to recap on a couple of key points that Dana's made throughout her presentation before we move to the recommendations. We need to reduce our residual waste capacity in order to maximise recycling and get us to 70%. We've undertaken a comprehensive consultation and engagement process throughout the summer, and Dana referred in his presentation to Monmouthshire County Council. They didn't do that, they just took the decision. We've purposely not done that. We wanted to engage the public in this journey with us. Throughout that consultation, the public and the Cleaner Scrutiny Committee clearly recommended their preference for 140-litre skinny bins. As Dana has mentioned, that option provides a one-off cost of $754,000. But after that cost has been funded, it will realise £78,000 of annual savings from there on in. The food liners would cost an extra £30,000 per annum to introduce, but will provide only 1% recycling. And through the public consultation, only 4% of the public actually said that this would be a factor that would make them recycle more. The Cleaner Scrutiny Committee, however, recommended that liners be introduced. Even though there is an upfront cost of $754,000 for the skinny bins, this is offset against the potential of £600,000 per annum if we don't do something about reducing our residual waste capacity, plus the reputational damage of not recycling in accordance with European legislation and Welsh Government legislation, and indeed your own corporate plan priority. We have a tight implementation programme, as Dana mentioned. We need to get this up and running on the ground by September next year. And we recognise that communication and engagement will be key to bring the public with us on this journey. So I'll now move to the recommendations that are set out in the report. We are seeking Council approval on the following: that we reduce residual capacity by replacing the 240-litre black wheelie bin with a 140-litre black wheelie bin, which we call the skinny bin. We are seeking Council approval to introduce a new dedicated fortnightly service for absorbent hygiene products. We are seeking Council approval that we do not introduce food caddy liners at this time, but pursue a cost-neutral means of doing so in the future, which we will bring back to Council for approval. We are seeking Council approval to delegate responsibility for the implementation of the new system to myself as Chief Officer Neighbourhood Services, and a further report will be presented to Council on the prudential borrowing option for purchasing the new bins. So they are the recommendation that we are seeking your approval on today, members. So finally, just some key facts. Waste is a corporate plan priority. That is something that you recognise very early on and that you want to get to 70%. But clearly we cannot afford not to do this financially or reputationally, but we have a choice on how we do it. And we've engaged the public throughout the summer. They've clearly told us what they want, and the proposal set out to you today will ensure that we meet the 70% target. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Leader, do you want to come back in? Right. Members, have we had any questions or comments? Councillor Parish.
Thank you. I'd like to support the amendment to explore the possibility of securing sponsorship or alternative grant funding to offset the cost of providing food caddy liners. The Cleaner Overview and Scrutiny Committee, as we just heard, felt very strongly that food caddy liners should be provided to encourage more residents of Torfaen to recycle kitchen waste. And the committee made a clear recommendation that food caddy liners should be introduced at the same time as any changes to the collection of waste are implemented. As Chair of the Cleaner Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I urge Council to support this amendment as well as the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Parish. I don't think we've had an amendment though yet, have we? It's just moved. Pardon? Yes, the recommendation. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank officers for a thorough and comprehensive presentation. Obviously, this is an issue that people are really quite sensitive about. In New Inn, I'm content that people did have an opportunity to have their say, because myself and colleagues delivered 2,500 survey leaflets around the ward, so I'm pleased to see that a lot of my residents took the trouble to respond. I think the results that have come back are statistically significant. 1,400 odd responses is a valid representation of public opinion, and so I tend to the view that is of the three options presented, which might be argued as the least unattractive, marginally more unattractive, and further unattractive, the majority of people have overwhelmingly favoured the least unattractive option. So it's hard to go against that expression of public opinion. So I'm content to support the recommendations. There are a couple of other points I wanted to make, and a bit of a question. There's talk about buying new vehicles and obviously the new skinny bins. Is there any residual value in the existing vehicles or existing stock of bins that we can extract some value from in some way, shape or form? Because every little counts, so to speak. I wonder, slightly as an aside, the improvements at the Household Waste Recycling Centre, which are, I think, greatly to be welcomed, because I think that will make people's experience of recycling their waste at the recycling centre greatly improved. I wonder whether, and this is something I've raised with officers in the past, whether we could relook at the possibility of extracting serviceable items that people do dump at the recycling centre, so that charitable organisations might be able to extract them and get some value from them for the benefit of Torvine residents. And I have to, perhaps it's a slightly cheeky suggestion, as we're talking about food caddy liners, my parents use just some newspaper in the bottom of their food waste bin, so I wonder if the conveniently delivered Torvine Talks, after people have studied and pored over every letter and dot and comma in it, could conveniently be used as a food caddy liner to assist in the overall meeting of our recycling target. But anyway, broadly I'm supporting these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Should we answer the questions as they go along? Dana, yes?
I can answer those questions. In terms of residual value for the bins and the vehicles, these are additional vehicles. So it's not that we're replacing existing. We need to increase our stock because we're expecting to be collecting a lot more recycled material, and therefore we need more vehicles to collect a greater level of material. The bins, however, there will be a residual value to the existing 240-litre bins, and what we've tried to outline in the report is that we will seek we'll get some money back on them, if you like, because they can be recycled themselves, and we will use that money to offset the transportation and distribution costs of delivering the new bins. So we've already factored that in. The second question around the Household Waste Recycling Centre, I'm very excited about our new Household Waste Recycling Centre. The work is going really well there. That will be open from the 1st of April. The residents of Torvine won't know themselves when they see it. It's really fab. And they will be able to take a much larger range of materials than we can currently accept at our centre, because the one we have now is just too small. It'll be under canopy, and there will be lots of containers to collect things that can't currently be taken. So that will be, and we're also looking at other materials and how we can use those for recycling. We currently do have contacts with an organisation, Recirculate. Yeah, Circulate. So we have contact with an organisation that takes material from us. So we've already got those, but we look to expand those under the new Household Waste Recycling Centre. Absolutely. And the third question, remind me. Oh yeah, absolutely. If we don't provide liners, but we've always said that people can buy the liners from the supermarket. They are relatively cheap, or they can use paper to wrap up food, and that's not a problem. So I think it's a very good suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Thanks for the explanation of the report. I think that's provided a good context for us to make our decision. I note the tough targets, looking at 70% by 2025. I'd also note that those targets are something that we're trying to meet in extremely tough financial times, and I hope that's something that's recognised in the Welsh Government. Although, aside from the targets, I think it's worth reiterating the principle that we can't continue as a society to dump things in the ground and to throw things away like we have done in the past. No one wants to live next door to a landfill site. No one wants to live next door to an incinerator. In order to move towards maybe some of the best practice that we can see on the continent, that's something that we need to do with or without targets. That said, I hope it's recognised sometimes that it's much easier to achieve recycling for residents who live in sort of maybe flat areas or larger houses than it is for maybe residents in steep valleys living in terraced accommodation or in flats. I think that's something that we have to recognise, and I hope that's something that those setting the targets will perhaps be sensitive to. This is the least worst option, I think, despite the upfront costs. I'm glad that we're not going for a monthly option. I'm glad that there's going to be no charge for green waste, because that just sounds counterintuitive. The other point I was going to make was maybe echoing Councillor Smith, if that doesn't place me in a place of danger, that I'm glad that you've said that we'll do all we can to seek recycling options for the current bins and any value that we can get back to them, because if we're encouraging people to recycle, I think that's something that we should set by example. Another thing is, how can we do more to encourage both community facilities and businesses to recycle in the same way that we're asking residents to?
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
Well, I'd like to go down the same line, following on from Anthony and Councillor Smith, which again puts me in dangerous country. But recognising that the 3 Rs, I've got to remember now, recycle, reduce and reuse, I'd love to get my hands on what's produced from the green waste bin, because we've had discussions about that already. Every allotment in the area would like to get hold of some of that municipal waste recycling, and I'm sure that I'd like to commend this report, because at the end of the day, I've sat with others on the committee and gone through figures, as Dana well knows. She's smiling at me now. We went into great detail for nearly a year on this, and this does seem, as Councillor Smith did say, it's the least worst option, but we have to do it. There's no two ways about it. And I've been in the recycling business for a fair amount of time myself. The thing is that we have to recycle. And if you look across the local authorities in Wales, you notice that they're all sat in council chambers, as I think was reported, but saying exactly the same thing. They've got will have to go out to consultation, or have gone out to consultation, and with respect to our constituents and public, they've done a good job coming back. I was hoping that that this has been a good result. They've told us, I think, what the scrutiny committee thought, which, and it's glad to have it confirmed. That, and I think, with respect to them, they've done very well. They've actually told us what we should be saying, and I respect them for that, to be honest.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also sit on the Cleaner Scrutiny Committee, where we, as my colleague said, we discussed this very, very under the microscope. But I feel very uncomfortable about the proposal for the skinny bin, from the simple fact you mentioned earlier about families of a larger size, 5 to 6. I think there's people that will really, really struggle with families of 4. I think we should have perhaps reduced the family size in one instance. And the other concern I have is that we, instead of increasing our recycling figures, we could jeopardise harming our recycling figures. People will take the stance of, or if they're not going to accommodate us, we're not going to accommodate them. So I won't be supporting the suggestion in the report, and I think it's a backward step for this borough.
Thank you. Councillor O'Donnell, do you want to come back in on that?
I just wanted to come back in on the question about the family size. It's 6 or more, and we've not yet found a family of 5 or less that wouldn't be able to cope with one of these options. And we have made an offer to any family that's come to us through Facebook or through the roadshows or any other means that we've had contact with them. If they've come to us and said to us genuinely, I really don't think we can cope with this, we've gone home with them and we've visited them and we've looked to see what they're doing. And in every single case that we've done that, we've made a small adjustment, because what we found is there was a whole stream they weren't recycling, or there were certain things that they didn't realise that they could recycle. And what we found is, by making some small adjustments, everyone has been able to cope. So we've yet to find anyone of a family 5 of 5 or less has not been able to cope with this reduced residual capacity. In fact, I've got evidence of a family of 7 who can adequately cope. So, but what we will do, and this is a solemn commitment we've always given, is if anyone has any concerns about this, to get in touch with us, and we will come out and talk to them and help them as best we can.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor. Since the consultation started, I think Torfaen has moved on, especially after the Cabinet meeting of yesterday, and now with the likelihood that the Torfaen County Borough Council will be merging with at least one other authority in 2018, and the current authority, when it comes to waste, if like they operate a different system to us. If another authority comes in as well, they are operating another system to us as well. In regarding the percentage, in regard in 2015 and to 16, I acknowledge that we need to actually increase by 6%, but then by the time we merge, or potentially merge in 2019, if like we'll be a different authority as such, and so the fact that there's a certain amount of unsurety in regarding where the council is going at the moment, and the fact that potentially we are looking at an expenditure of approximately £750,000 of £1 million. Now, in regarding when we had the seminars, the officers were going down the road of grant funding, but now we're looking at prudential borrowing, which again is an added expense to us. In addition, the fact that, and I welcome it, we are going to have a new household waste recycling centre, which is opening up in the 1st of April of this year. Part of me is saying that we should await the outcome of the percentage increase which is gained by the use of this facility before we go down and spend extra money.
Dana?
Mayor, could I just respond to that before Dana comes in? We're already working with Blaen y Gwent on our waste procurement, and Dana mentioned in her presentation that they are currently looking at options at reducing residual waste capacity themselves, either moving to 3 weekly collection or indeed, like ourselves, into skinny bins. I suppose what I'm saying is that we can't afford to wait for whatever the outcome of the discussions will bring. The 70% targets, whilst they seem a long way off, we have got to get in a position and get everything set up and get the public fully engaged with us before then. And whilst we can get to the next target with, as you mentioned, the opening of the Household Waste Recycling Centre, we certainly won't get any further than that. And I think if that is something that you were minded to consider, it is a very risky strategy if you were minded to delay this. And I just want to remind you that those penalty fines will kick in. And we are talking at £100,000 per percentage of waste that we miss that target by. It's a big, risky strategy for you.
I need to add to that, Madam Mayor, and say that actually the Household Waste Recycling Centre won't get us to 58%. The most we can expect additional recycling is 3 to 4% in the Household Waste Recycling Centre. So even if we just do that and do nothing else, that is not going to get us to 58% by 15-16. If we stay where we are, you're talking a £600,000 fine every year. That's not a one-off fine, that's an ongoing fine. So those fines will quickly amount to a number of millions of pounds, which as a council we can ill afford. Yes, there is an upfront cost, but we can fund that cost. But it's to avoid those penalties going forward. The other thing I would like to add is that Christina's quite rightly mentioned Blaen y Gwent in terms of reducing the residual capacity. Blaen y Gwent currently commingle, but they've just received a larger grant of Welsh Government to go to a curbside sort system. So by the time we merge, if that's the way that it goes, it may well be that the two authorities are on very similar systems anyway. So I don't think it would be necessarily appropriate to see that as a blocker to making a decision about what we need to do now.
I think that we need to actually hold off until we know in which direction we are going to actually go at the end of the day, knowing that we can always revisit it in a year's time, knowing that if you like, if the black bins and that due to come in line until September 2015 anyway, that gives us 6 months to see how the waste recycling centre is performing anyway. I think we need to revisit it.
I think just to reiterate what Dan has already said, the Household Waste Recycling Centre alone will not get us to the next target, and we will incur those fines.
Councillor Jeremiah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm slightly confused with the percentages from the road shows. 88% going for the smaller bins. I concentrated around my area and my surgeries. I know people like myself and the older people, the smaller bins is no problem. But I spoke to I spoke to people with children up from 2 children to 5 or 6 children. And even the people with 2 children are struggling with the bins that we got now at the moment. So I'm very, very concerned about that, and I can't support it. I'm sorry.
Dana?
What we tried to pull out in the report and the presentation was that we recognise that families with small children, particularly those in nappies, they need a little bit extra capacity. And that's why we're talking about introducing a brand new service, a nappy service for those families that they can sign up to. And the figure for the public was 74% of the public overall that said that they preferred the skinny bin. But we've tried to recognise the extra capacity through the introduction of the nappy service.
Can I just come back in? I know that you've got to support families with 5 or 6 children. Something, I think there's a limit on at 5 now. You've got to have a family of 5 before you're going to have a bigger bin. My concern is the people with 3 or 4 bins. You're going to ignore them. 3 or 4 children, sorry. You're going to ignore them, and they ain't going to get a bigger bin. That's my problem.
Okay, Councillor Cameron.
Well, I'd just like to say I'm not surprised that we're talking about this, because I think Christina will remember in the seminar I said it was, to me, fairly obvious what people would decide, because nobody really wants change to the extent that you'll have rubbish collected less often. But I'd just like to say I don't necessarily think that just changing to a smaller bin is actually going to make people recycle more. We have a large bin, as many others do, with very little rubbish that goes in it. The problem we have is with the recycling items. They overflow the recycling box sometimes. So I think it's education rather than changing the bin size. It worries me or concerns me about the cost that we're having to face for this option, although I understand the fine situation and we've got to weigh it up. But as Councillor Kemp says, I think at the moment everything's changing, and to do another change now which costs an awful lot, I think is something we should consider, whether we should be actually seeing what happens with the actual change in councils and all go the same way rather than go this way, and we might not then have room for manoeuvre, perhaps on going to monthly collections because we've gone to the smaller bins.
Chief Exec, do you want to come in now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think... Is that any better? Yes. I just thought there's been a lot of reference to the Cabinet discussion yesterday, so I think it's just important to understand the timescale of anything that might happen with regard to Blaenau Gwent. All that the Cabinet agreed yesterday was for officers to have discussions with regard to putting in an expression of interest, which would go in by the end of November. Should Council agree, and we've got a Council meeting before that date, should Council then agree and we put in an expression of interest, we then won't know until January of next year whether the Welsh Government accept that expression of interest. If they do, it's not till June 2015 that we would put in a full business case. And then we wouldn't actually be looking at a full merger of councils until 2018. So that's 4 years away, and I think it's really important to understand that timetable when we're talking about how long we can put off decisions relating to waste. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Craig.
Thank you. I'm looking to the future, really, and given the sort of figures we've got to reach, I'm very mindful of the problems that exist at the moment with flats and the fact that we'll also be looking more in the future towards 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom accommodation. I would like to see somewhere some recommendations, either coming from Welsh Government or locally, about what happens in terms of the receptacles that those people who live in those types of accommodation are going to have, because it's very obvious at the moment that it's a problem. We need to look from a planning point of view as to how that kind of situation can be resolved. I've seen it resolved on the continent. I'm sure our officers are aware of other alternatives. I do think we need to be thinking about that now, not in 5 years' time.
Dana?
Madam Mayor, we're currently running a project looking at those flats. We've only got about 2,000 flats in Torfaen that don't have a service at the moment. We've just finished a piece of work that we did over the summer analysing those flats and what we can do for those flats. And what we're going to be proposing going forward is for that most of those flats, we're going to have a different system just for those flats. The box system won't necessarily work for them, so we will look at a commingle, some sort of commingle system. We haven't quite bottomed out the detail yet. But the Welsh Government legislation allows us to make changes within an area to suit that particular area, and we will do that for our flats. Those flats that can work perfectly well with our current system will be rolled out or have been rolled out, but for those that are remaining, we can look at a slightly different system for those. And the other thing I just wanted to say was just to let you know that you can have as many boxes as you like. So if your boxes are overflowing, they're completely free, and just let us know and we can get you some more.
Thank you. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, Dana just actually, the last sentence, she said, answered one of my questions about boxes. There is a concern about larger families. I mean, the larger families will create more tins, more cardboard, more of everything, which creates more black boxes. I mean, it was said just now that black boxes are overflowing. Well, I use 2 black boxes a week now, and my wife is educating me how to recycle, believe it or not. If I go to put something in there, the other one, our caddy, we've always used caddy bags from day one. It's just hygiene to us. But what people must understand is they don't have to have one black box, as many as you want. So if you have a larger family, you do actually create more cardboard, more tins, which is all recyclable. I mean, Christina did have a bag one day here of a family of 4, and she held it up. I was a bit sceptical about that. I mean, whether it was just a bit of front for it or not, I don't know. That's fine. But I think every councillor here at the moment, wherever he goes or she goes, gets it in the neck about recycling. And I was in the village pub and I've said this as well, and there was 6, 7 guys there all talking about recycling. Impossible, it'll never work. And I got another friend there, he recycles once a month, because he does recycle everything. His food waste is wrapped up in paper, normally Torfaen Talks, he wraps it in. Sorry about that, got to get a pen in now and again. But he recycles everything, and that's once a month, so everybody's talking, and all of a sudden everybody realises it can be done. And Stuart has concerns about it, we all have concerns, but I think what Dana says, we have to educate people today. in my black box, I mean, I put a pair of shoes in there yesterday. I've only had them for 5 years and they've worn out. So my wife's expecting them to be gone again today because I take them back out. But what we can put in there is continually educating people. I have some neighbours that don't recycle anything. Everything goes in the black bin. Food, you name it, it goes in there. So they don't recycle one thing. They're going to have to when this comes out. But if we can get over to people that not one black box, if you have 4 black boxes, it's still recycling, and that's what you have to do, educating people permanently. And it's not educating now and again, it's continually, because you stop educating people and they forget, and it's back to normal. Thank you for that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Morby?
No, thanks.
Councillor Daniels?
I agree with Ronnie on education, but I feel quite strongly that we need a systematic encouragement to make a shift in recycling target. Oh, sorry, I'll move a bit closer. But I'm somewhat sort of confused by the independent group's stance on this issue, because whilst on the same hand you're agreeing that we need to meet our recycling targets to avoid hundreds of £1,000s in fine, on the other hand, a number of you have said that you don't agree with the proposal, despite one of you, Councillor Evans, being a member of that Cleaner Communities Committee that recommended the 3 options in the first place. I'm really not sure what your stance is and what your recommendation would be as an alternative to what we're putting forward today. What would you do otherwise?
Madam Mayor, can I just go back to Councillor Daniels? Why you mentioned the independent group? I mean, I have my own opinion. Yeah, can you retract that? I mean, you just mentioned the independent group again. It's not the opinion of the independent group.
Right, can we keep on track with what's, that we're on debating? Try not to argue over who's in what group or whatever, okay? Carry on.
They're not a party, I agree. I said several members, and if you like, I'd say all the councillors that objected to our proposal, if you'd like to make a suggestion separately, independently, do so.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just 2 quick comments. One, I think obviously it's important we do this because of the possibility of being fined, and it's foolhardy, I think, to put it off. When the recycling centre, whilst we'll see an increase, obviously you have to take your recycling there. And many people don't drive, unless Stagecoach want their buses to be full of people's rubbish. And also, again, with the merger, we don't know who we could end up with. We could be having talks, it might fall through. Second thing, I think we have to do it because of an attitudinal shift. Obviously, a lot of people are saying it is difficult. But over the next few years, we'll be seeing increasingly harsh directives, I think, from central government and the EU, forcing us to up recycling across the board. And, we can't just keep compromising with people and say, it's all right, you don't have to, because they will. And it's better to start early.
Thank you. Councillor Cross.
I'm broadly in favour of the proposal. I do believe that as a family of 3 in my household, that it's perfectly capable, people are perfectly capable of actually managing the system. I understand that the fact that we have such a large bin, the capacity of that large bin means that people don't have to recycle, and that's essentially what this is about, is once you have that capacity, you don't have to change. And it's already been noted, people don't like change, people don't necessarily adjust to change very well. However, my issue revolves around the caddy, the bin caddy, the food bin caddies. It's been stated that the new tip changes would save us around 3 to 4% more on recycling, and it's about 1.35% on food bags. That's the projected amount. I think it would be more. So if we're going for little tiny percentages on the household recycling centre, and there's potentially a very small percentage on the food bags, I think that there's still more debate to be had here. It's still a relevant and reasonable thing to consider. Now, I know that it has been stated vaguely something about looking into the sponsorship for bags, but that's not been made very clear to members. And we've been in a situation in the past where a suggestion has been put forward. The wording hasn't been strong enough, and so it's dropped by the wayside because it's not become a priority for this council. I mean, one of the worst things as a mother in my household is the food bin. My commitment to my recycling means that I overcome it. I do think that this would be important for families and would make a change. And it is the reflection of the Scrutiny Committee that it would help make an enhanced service for people to be able to buy into.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got two people who want to speak give a second statement or question, but I'm going to bring in people who haven't spoken first. So, Barry Taylor, Councillor Taylor.
Can I say that I will have to support this issue? You know, there are no right and wrong answers because waste is a big issue throughout the country. But we have gone out to public consultation, and this is what the public have said. And if we don't listen to public consultation and do what the public say, we will be criticised for that. And also I am concerned as well that if we do not achieve our targets and we are fined heavily, we're going to be criticised for that. So there are things that I would like to have done. I'd like the consultation to be longer and more looked at, but the timescales are not there, so I can only say that I will have to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, I ain't going to keep on and on and on because we've had a good old debate on this morning, but I've fetched it up on 3 or 4 or 5 occasions about this big black bin. Now, if you'd have gone up, they collected the service yesterday, and if you'd have seen up on Pentewin and Frio Land and places like that with a big black bin, it is absolutely even. To do away with that big black bin, I don't know where the rubbish is going to go. It's going to make absolutely chaotic in this borough. And I've said about it on half a dozen times. Nobody's taken any notice, so we'll have to see, somebody will have to get a truck behind the service and pick up all the rubbish.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to pick up on a few points that have been made. Councillor Hunt made a good point at the beginning about the targets that have been set by the Welsh Government. Now, this council would have known about these targets for some time. When I worked in a different sector, any project management, we had an acronym to try and implement it successfully, and it was specific, it was measurable, it was attainable, it was realistic, and it was timely. Those were the key things for a successful deliverable. Now, with this, obviously, it is specific and it is measurable, but a 6% change in a 12-month time period is really a step change in performance, to go from 52% to 58%. So, you know, part of what I'm saying is what representations were made back to the Welsh Government when they came out with these targets, because it's very difficult for, I think, any council to achieve a 6% improvement within a 12-month time frame. It's a big ask. I would also echo the comments made by Councillor Parish and Councillor Cross. I was part of the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee meeting as well, and it was a strong recommendation to implement the food caddy liners. I know you're saying through the feedback mechanisms from the public consultations there was only 4%, but I don't feel the emphasis was placed on that in the public consultation. The emphasis was on which of the 3 options the public would prefer to have in terms of a reduced size black bin, move to plastic bags, or move to monthly collections. Now, it's already been acknowledged that this would deliver an increase about 1.35% towards this 6% target. And for the costs involved of £30,000 per annum, I appreciate that's an ongoing cost. I've taken on board the leader's comments that we'd be looking for sponsorship, but I'm also dismayed that we're being encouraged to take on prudential borrowing of £750,000, and we won't commit at this point in time today to expending £30,000 per annum, which is going to save us in the first year £100,000 in fines that we would incur from the Welsh Government by not meeting the target. And clearly, if we're looking at these changes coming in, taking effect from September next year, then we are going to incur that £100,000 of fine within the next financial year. So for me, it makes financial sense for this council to agree to fund the cost of the bin liners, because by expending £30,000, they would be saving themselves from having to pay a £100,000 fine. So that just makes common sense. Also, in terms of the recommendations, I'm surprised that the recommendation didn't go one step further, and this touches on what Dana was saying about the sorting, the commingled sorting at flats premises, because during the committee, the commingled sorting of refuse from the flats, it's already been looked into, and that's been estimated that would save us and at least go an additional 1% further towards meeting the target. So I would have hoped that there would have been a commitment for that in terms of the recommendations in the report. I know Dana said that that's being looked at, but it's something that has been looked at for some time. So I would have thought that should have been included in a report. We would give a commitment to looking at the commingling sorting of the refuse from the flats, because that gives us an additional 1% towards the 6% target. With having the 1% for the commingling for the flats, the 1.35% coming in by the adoption of the food liners in the food caddies, and potential 3 or 4% from the improvements from the Household Waste Recycling Centre, that then delivers the 6% that we're looking for. And the other thing that came out of the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee meeting very, very strongly was about the process of educating people. A lot of people were not aware of all of the products that could be recycled, and rather than looking to further down the line to take in punitive measures for failing to comply, really I would have liked to have seen a lot more focus on educating people in terms of exactly what can be recycled, and I feel that would also raise the numbers that the percentages that we need to find. And also, as a final note, it's been said that this will most likely result in increases in fly tipping, because that's the experience of other councils that have adopted similar procedures. And what is the costs, the additional costs that these other councils have encountered as a result of the increase in fly tipping? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Can I bring Christina back in?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind members that the focus of this report is around reducing the capacity of the black bin. Okay, so, and Councillor Bevan has highlighted a number of other equally important elements of our waste strategy: education, enforcement, commingling, food waste liners. They are all other elements of our overall waste strategy, but the focus today is on reducing black bin capacity, and that's the decision that we are asking you to take today. With regards to the food waste liners, absolutely right in what you're saying, Councillor Bevan, in terms of the maths behind it, but we feel that there are opportunities that we haven't had time yet to explore, that we could actually come up with a cost-neutral solution to the food liners provision, and we are mindful of the Council's position financially, and we are just asking for a bit more time to go away and do some more work around that to come up with a cost-neutral solution rather than a cost solution. Whilst it does provide savings, we are asking, for upfront investment, which we think with a bit more time we can actually come up with a cost-neutral solution. But I just want to remind members the decision today is around reducing black bin capacity, and it's a very, very important element of taking that step change from where we are now to 70%.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, can I come back to that? Just a very quick
Quickly.
point. With regards to that about the bin liners, if the Council agreed to adopt that, take on that cost, there's nothing to say that you couldn't continue with the looking into funding and therefore removing that cost from the Council further on. Just because we agree on one thing today, it doesn't preclude you from doing that going forwards. And I do feel that it will. It's £30,000 to save a potential £100,000 fine. I think we have to look at it in that context as well. But I don't think that vague things about we'll look at it going forwards. We could agree to it today, and you could still go away and come up with a scheme for making it cost neutral.
Councillor Karen.
Just to ask for a clarification on the recyclable of the bin liners issue, but I would like to make a quick comment before I ask that question. If all members look at page 46 and the map that's on there, the graph that's on there, 37.1% of black bins are full of or include food and garden waste. So this is the big issue that we have to. And remember now, this is food and garden waste, so we've got green bins up there as well. So there's a lot of people who are not recycling virtually anything at all. But I would like to ask about this. I mean, it was in context of your reply to Councillor Bevan. We're talking about a 1.35% increase if we supply these bin liners. Is that 1.35% of our total waste, or 1.35% of the amount of food waste that we presently collect? Because that makes a huge amount of difference to the maths.
I'm sure Dana will add a bit more meat to the bones here, but it's actually on our total waste. Yeah.
What I would also say is we're talking about a small 1.35% increase, but that's for providing liners. But the issue we have is the one you've just hit upon, and actually the one that Councillor Marshall also highlighted. People aren't recycling their food. So even if we provide liners now, without reducing residual capacity, that's not going to encourage people to start recycling their food. Councillor Marshall made a point that the bins are full in certain areas. They are full, but they're actually full of paper and glass and tins and cardboard and things that really should be going into recycling containers. And the reason people aren't putting them in the recycling containers is because they've got lots of capacity in the big black bin. And so what this report is about, just to sort of bring it back to the focus of what the recommendation is about, is reducing that capacity because it structurally encourages people to then start using other means of disposing of their waste through a service that we already offer. And when Monmouth did this, as the chart showed in the previous couple of slides, it actually more than halved the amount of residual black waste that people were putting out, and there was more than a massive increase, a double amount of food that then started being recycled. So when you look at the figures in the report and from the consultant's report, for example, the 3% for the Household Waste Recycling Centre, that will be as it grows and as it matures, as people get used to using it. It's not going to suddenly jump to 3% on day one, because people will need to get used to the system. If we don't do anything to reduce our residual capacity, we will not meet our next target, and we will be fined. And I think that's the context against which we need to consider the recommendations.
Leader?
Yeah, I think we should move on now. This is about a fair hearing. The majority party will be supporting the recommendations. We need to understand that. Chair.
Mayor, with your indulgence, I'd like to sort of bring an amendment to see if we can sort of move it on a little bit. It's quite a simple one, really. There seems to be a sense that the caddy liners are an issue. Some people might feel it's a small issue, but I think it's a major one. I think it's something we could all sort of agree on. So what I'm sort of hoping to do is, rather than sort of leave it up to officers, inform officers now that the will of the council is that we do want caddy liners, and we want that to happen at the same time as the skinny bins are introduced. So therefore I'm introducing a sort of amendment on B of the recommendations, and strike B and just replace it with approve providing food caddy liners at this stage.
Can I just continue now then? The majority party have discussed it and we will be supporting the recommendation. There's two things that have dominated this whole debate. One is our desire to encourage recycling, and the other one is the possibility of a fine. And to do that, officers have been out consulting with the public. And indeed, the officers are telling me that the public are telling them that this is what they want. Now, I hope the figures and the data that has been compiled by officers is absolutely kosher, and I hope it doesn't come back and bite us. Because if it does, then we'll be questioning, how that data was collected and who collected it and so on and so forth. Now, I think we've had a fair enough discussion, and what we need to do now, I'm going to move that the recommendation of the document.
Chair, I have asked to come back in.
I just want to second Jeff's motion, amendment, sorry.
Right, okay. Listen, before we vote on the amendment, before we bring everybody back in, we've had a long debate. Unless it's anything new, is there anything new, Councillor Evans, or is it going over?
Well, it's for clarification, really, Madam Mayor, what the statement that the Chief Executive made earlier.
Well, quickly, and then we'll move on to the vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Alison, you mentioned earlier about the discussions that have taken place, and they have taken place this week with the Cabinet, with the possible merger, and you mentioned Blaen y Gwent being one of those that will be instrumental in that discussion going forward. Is there another one? I understand that there is another authority that will be in the possible merger pipeline, and that being Monmouth. Is that the case?
The only authority that we sought the approval of Cabinet to discuss with is Blaen y Gwent. The reason for that is that you will know that the Williams map puts Torfaen, Blaen y Gwent and Caerphilly together. Caerphilly have said that they do not wish to merge with anybody voluntarily, so I think we can assume, unless that changes, that they will be looking for a compulsory route around 2020. Our Cabinet have said in the past that their preferred merger would be Torfaen, Blaen y Gwent and Monmouthshire, but you've got to have 3 willing volunteers in order to take that forward. Now, I know that Monmouthshire have a special council meeting on Wednesday to enable them to take a view on whether they wish to look at a voluntary merger. We don't know until they've taken that decision where that will go. But looking at the political landscape, one might possibly predict that they won't want a voluntary merger because of the effect that that would have on the politics. We don't know until they've taken their decision. But the only council that are interested in having a voluntary merger discussion with Torfaen are Blaen y Gwent. Now, what we know is, unless reorganisation disappears off the agenda altogether, which is highly unlikely, that either way, whichever way we go in a 3, Blaen y Gwent would be one of the councils we would be merging with. The prospectus on voluntary merger, which has been issued by Welsh Government, makes it clear that they would be prepared to consider voluntary mergers on smaller blocks within a larger merger eventually. And it's on that basis that what Cabinet have given permission to do is to have conversations with Blaen y Gwent to put in an expression of interest, which would be the first stage. We wouldn't put that expression of interest in without a full council debate. The Councillor Rees asked a question about that previously, and the leader gave an undertaking that that would take place. Should council agree that, we will put in the expression of interest.
What has this got to do with collecting waste? I don't know why
sorry,
you
I'm just helping Councillor Evans to understand the situation.
Thank you very much for that, Alison. Why I asked that question, why I needed to know that information, because as you know, Monmouthshire have got a very, very successful recycling procedure in place at the moment. And that's why I asked that question, Leader.
Right, okay. Councillor Rees, you've made an amendment.
Point of order, sorry, Madam Mayor. We had earlier an amendment put forward, albeit using the wrong words, I think, in terms of seconding it, by Councillor Parish. That seems to have disappeared from the debate. And I think we ought to be taking that as an amendment and asking whether Councillor Rees is happy with that amendment, which amounts to much the same thing, that we would support the idea of the Council providing the caddy bin liners, preferably on a no-cost basis by attracting funding from alternative sources, which could include advertising on the bin liners. So I think really we ought to be introducing that, and to have accepted an amendment from Councillor Rees without having cleared the original amendment put forward by Councillor Parish seemed a little bit unfair.
Sorry, Councillor Moby, I didn't realise it was an amendment. It wasn't seconded or anything.
You didn't give anybody opportunity to second it because you said that she had used the wrong words, but the intention was quite clear. And that's really what I would like to see us doing. And as I say, I think Councillor Rees would probably be happy with that because it commits us to buying the bin liners. It commits us also to trying to find a way of making that cost neutral as far as the budget is concerned. So if Councillor Rees is happy to accept that, can't we agree that wording?
Councillor Moby's wise words as usual. However, I do think that we need to be absolutely clear and instruct officers that we want the caddy liners now, and how they find the money to do that. That's whether they do that for sponsorship. That's a matter for them later. But we need to give a clear instruction that we want it now. My recollection of the amendment, it wasn't that strong. So what I would suggest to my colleagues is that we go with my amendment for now, which I think is a stronger version, and then if that fails, then I'm quite happy to support Councillor Parish's amendment.
You should accept that, because it's very near the mark, isn't it? Norma?
Yes. What I said was I'd like to support the amendment, that I thought you were making an amendment, but then I was told it was a recommendation. And it was to explore the possibility of securing sponsorship or alternative grant funding to offset the cost of providing food caddy liners. Thank you.
Microphone. Leader, can you turn your microphone on, please?
Sorry. No, I accept that. This issue was discussed in the majority party group when we made that decision, and I'll accept that.
Yes, hang on, I'm going to pass you over to Richard Gwinnell to sort things out in a minute, because I'm very confused. I'm really sorry, but...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did offer. It's not a hospital pass. I did offer. Councillor Parish said a lot earlier, I support the amendment, but there was no amendment. An amendment has been moved by Councillor Rees. I think, actually, we're at the point where that's been seconded. There isn't another amendment on the table. I actually think everybody's, in relative agreement with the fact that, two people have, suggested an amendment, but, Councillor Rees has actually moved one. So I think you need to go to the vote on that. And if that succeeds, that amends the recommendations which are in the report. If it fails, then there's an opportunity for another amendment to be moved.
Okay, right. So, Councillor Rees has made an amendment. Would you like to make it clear?
Yeah. Somebody in the council, because we've been, and I watched the chief executive doing it earlier on, having to bang the mic. We're on live, being videoed. I hope somebody will actually try and deal with this. Look, let's take Councillor Parish's amendment first, which you're absolutely right.
Sorry, Leader, Councillor Parish did not make an amendment.
No, she tried to.
So, I'm sorry, Councillor Rees has made an amendment. It's been seconded. We're going to vote on that amendments. Councillor Rees, would you like to make it clear?
Yeah, very simply, we're looking at the recommendations, so I want to delete B and replace it with the words approve providing food caddy liners at this stage.
Is there a seconder? Right, okay. All those in favour?
Chair, can I ask for a recorded vote, please?
All those in favour of recorded vote? Okay, sorry, not enough. Right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right, we're going to vote on Councillor Rees's amendment. All those in favour? All those against? Anyone abstaining? So the amendment is lost. Okay.
Can we give notice of further amendment, please?
Right. Okay. I'd like to hear the amendment.
Could I ask Councillor Parish to read it out?
Yeah. The amendment is to explore the possibility of securing sponsorship or alternative grant funding to offset the cost of providing food caddy liners.
So it is the same as the recommendations then?
It's an amendment now. Seconded.
I second that, Madam Mayor.
Linda Willis would like to come in.
Councillor Parish, are you actually aiming to say that the Council should should provide food liners, but also seek to see whether that we can offset that cost?
Yes.
Yes.
So I provide food liners and look for support to offset the cost.
Might then your amendment be better expressed, if I can put it that way, to say, this is little b, approve providing food caddy liners at this stage, but to explore the possibility of introducing them in such a way that is cost neutral to the Council, for example, by having them sponsored.
That is a subtle difference. That is a subtle difference.
Okay, well, that's up to members. That's one suggestion of as my understanding of what you might be aiming. So you're introducing it, but actually asking to see whether we can also provide, which is, I think, what was suggested in the debate earlier.
Right. No. To provide food caddy liners and to explore the possibility of securing sponsorship and alternative grant funding to offset the cost of providing them.
Can I suggest a way of reaching that that's the same point that's maybe a bit simpler? If you look in recommendation B, if you insert before the word cost neutral, preferably, then that achieves the same point without as much complexity.
Madam Mayor. It says to pursue the possibility of introducing them in the future. That's what it said. And the difference is, as I understand it, Norma, what you were saying, is that we'll introduce them now and we'll look for sponsorship in the future.
Yes, exactly, yes. To provide them now and then to explore the possibility later. Yeah.
Right, okay. Is that seconded? Thank you. Okay, all those in favour of the new recommendation?
Would you just clarify exactly what the amendment is again, please?
Hopefully somebody will clarify it clearly so everybody understands. Councillor Parish?
To provide food caddy liners and to explore the possibility of securing sponsorship or alternative grant funding to offset the cost of providing them. To start off, to provide them and then explore.
Okay, everybody happy? Right, all those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Right, okay, that amendment is carried. Thank you. Right, okay, so we're now going to vote on the substantive motion as amended. Everyone in favour?
Chair, could I ask for a recorded vote, please, because of the topic that's being voted on, please? It's an important topic, and I would request a recorded vote, if possible.
Okay, all those in favour of a recorded vote? Sorry, not enough. Okay. So, all those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Thank you, members. That's carried, finally. Okay, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, 10, skin piercing bylaws. Duncan Smith, Chief Officer. No, sorry, Duncan Smith isn't doing it. Kim Pugh, can you present your report for us, please?
The report seeks to update the powers that we have to register and regulate tattooists and other skin piercing operations in Torfaen in order to ensure appropriate hygiene standards and to protect public health. Any procedure which involves skin piercing actually carries some potential health risks to the person undergoing them. These can include skin infections, allergic or toxic reactions to the substances used, and also the transmission of blood-borne viruses such as hepatitis or HIV. The bylaws would require specified skin piercing premises to register with the authority. It slightly expands the range of businesses that would be covered to include body piercers, which are not currently covered by our existing regulatory regime. Registration also allows the authority to set standards, which include the suitability of the premises and the equipment used, the steps needed to ensure that premises and equipment are kept clean, cleanliness and hygiene of the operator themselves, and the safe disposal of the needles and other equipment that's used in treatments. So therefore, I am asking that in order to protect public health, I'm recommending that the Council approves the adoption of the new Torfaen County Borough Council bylaws in respect of acupuncture, tattooing, semi-permanent skin colouring, cosmetic piercing and electrolysis, as attached as Appendix 1 to this report.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, the recommendations... would any members like to ask any questions or comments? No? Okay. The recommendation is on page 237 of your agenda, that Council adopts a new bylaws. Can I have a show of hands, please? Everyone for? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Thank you, members. The new bylaws are adopted. Agenda item 11, the Council's annual performance report for 2013-14. Alison Ward, Chief Exec, can you present your report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Every year the Council is required to produce and publish a performance report which outlines its progress against the previous year's improvement activity. And the report you have on your agenda today charts the progress made by the Council against the 15 improvement objectives that form the basis of our forward-pacing plan for 2013-14. So it's important for members to understand that we're looking at the performance for the year 13-14. The progress that we've made against those performance objectives, improvement objectives rather, is set out in detail in the appendices. it is voluminous, members, and I appreciate that. But chief officers are here to answer any specific questions you may have about specific areas of performance in their area. I think the easiest way to look at the performance overall is to look at the page 286 of your agenda. It's page 26 of the actual appendix. But on page 286 of your agenda, you'll see that there are two pie charts. One saying, have we met our targets? And the other saying, are we improving performance? And that gives you, I think, the best snapshot of where we are. If you look at those pie charts, you'll see that overall the performance picture is a positive one. We're not in any way complacent about that. Constant attention, monitoring and effort has to be put in to sustaining improvement. And of course we have particular issues around education and special measures, and we're working well with the Recovery Board, but there's still a long way to go before we've achieved what we want to in education. But overall, this is a positive performance picture. Of the 133 performance measures or milestones we set, we've met or exceeded our target in 80 of those. Good progress has been reported in 10 of the 15 improvement objectives, and 29 out of 44 of the statutory measures, the national indicators, have shown improvement. And you can see from the pie charts that you can see the dark area, which is the areas where we have not improved. Sorry,
just some members haven't got if you've got a paper agenda, there was large appendices, so you can view them online.
Mayor, I am concerned because there's some members in this cabinet who have got the full document, in front of them, and I can view there's an awful lot of members who have only got part of the document. My question is why has some members got the full documents and some have only got partial documents?
Well, I think the answer, Madam Mayor, is that some members read the reports before the meeting, realised that there was an appendix, and also looked at that. It's really no excuse when you've had it for a week to say we haven't got all the information which has been provided on time, and it just reinforces the point that members need to look at the agenda, read the reports before they come into this council meeting.
Mayor, if you like, it is done electronically. I have read the report, on electronic format. However, the question needs to be asked, why has some members got the full document which has been printed, and some members haven't. If people want to read the information electronically, they can, as I have. However, the Chief Executive is basically bringing up questions which relate to the full document in which I haven't got in front of me.
I bring Richard Gwinnell in to answer this, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. No member was provided with the full document. I can guarantee that. All members had precisely the same paper copy. This council took a decision that we're moving towards paperless meetings, and that is the spirit of that, and it would have cost an awful lot of money to produce the full appendices. So we didn't. However, members of the public who are in the gallery don't have online access in this chamber. So we have to take some spare copies of the full document so that members of the public in the gallery can see them. And it may well be that some members of the council picked up those full documents. But I can guarantee you that all members had exactly the same set of papers.
Point that those members that have got those big copies, pick them up off this shelf here.
Can I just clarify, because this is a very important report, members, and I don't want us to get bogged down in how many pages people have got. Has everybody got access to look at the pie charts that I'm referring to? Right, okay. It is important, this is a very important report. Do any members need to see that and haven't got access to it? Have we got any copies members could look at?
The Chief Exec, if you're bringing questions to the actual council to consider, we need the information to actually refer to.
Councillor Kemp, you had the information.
Yes,
it's
in
just
front
that you
of us
don't have
now.
it with you.
Yes, at the moment.
I think there is an important distinction there.
Councillor Karen.
Just to say, I've got the full report. I have paper copies, but I printed it out online because it was late being printed. So I didn't have it in time for our meeting on Thursday, so I printed it out Wednesday night. So I've got the full copy in front of me, but I printed it myself offline.
Could you be very kind and share it with Councillor Kemp, Councillor Karen, because that might solve a problem?
There are some copies in the gallery, in a public gallery, if somebody wants to look at them now.
I think Councillor Kemp is printing enough already.
Councillor Bevan.
Madam Mayor.
Obviously not enough.
Can I just make a suggestion, please? Could I suggest that we just have a recess for a couple of minutes? If the Chief Exec is going to refer to a specific pie chart, would it be possible for Richard or one of the other officers just to get us a photocopy for all members? Because I'm in the same position as Councillor Kemp. We would have had this information electronically. We don't have it in the paper agenda today in front of us. And if the Chief Exec wants us to specifically look at this one page, then please can we have at least have a photocopy of this one page? Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. Councillor Crick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Would it be possible to put it on the screen?
Yes. Yes, right, okay. Should we have a minute? Right, okay, should we have 5 minutes recess while it's all set up then?
Just pause it by looks, they're going to make a run for it. I don't understand that. Anyway, on the web. Yeah. So that's what we got it for. Then this is ridiculous. Well, don't worry about it. It was going to happen at some point. You might actually bring the issue slightly more to the fore. Yeah, it's fine.
I thought it would happen on this report because, you know, specific people might say, if you look at page, 3, blah, 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 blah. So I did think it was going to happen, yeah, but I didn't get as far as...
Councillor Haynes, your microphone's on. Okay, members, are we ready to reconvene? Okay. Chief Exec.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll recap briefly. We're looking at the performance for 2013-14 of the Council. There are appendices which some members will have had the opportunity to read. If there are any questions on those appendices, then the Chief Officers are here to answer those. But I wanted to draw your attention to these two pie charts in particular. The one on the left-hand side is have we met our targets? If you look at the one on the left-hand side, the green is where targets have been met. The red is where targets have not been met. The yellow is when we have come within close proximity of the target. And the grey is where a target is not appropriate in that particular indicator. The one on the right is are we improving our performance? On that, the green is where we have improved performance. The red is where performance is deteriorating. The yellow is where performance has been maintained without change. And the grey is where performance improvement is not appropriate to that particular target. So whilst there is a huge amount of information in the appendices which members will have had an opportunity to read, those two pie charts actually set out the situation in summary very clearly. And as I said before, in broad terms, as you can see, the performance picture is a positive one. We're not complacent about that, particularly around the education indicators where there's work going on with the Recovery Board and there's still work to be done. But if you look at those pie charts, of the 133 performance measures or milestones set, on the left-hand side we met or exceeded our target in 80 of them. Good progress has been reported in 10 out of our 15 improvement objectives, and 29 out of 44 of our statutory national indicators have shown improvement. And I would remind members that this is against a backdrop of diminishing resources. So that is the picture of the performance for last year, for 2013-14. The recommendation is that you approve the report. But as I say, some members, I have no doubt, will have questions on individual aspects of performance, and if they do, Chief Officers are here to answer any details you have about any particular service improvement that you want to explore in more detail. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thanks so much, Madam Mayor. I've got a question. There's reference here to some cases data not available. Well, if this is the kind of the annual report of how we're doing on this, it's a little bit surprising that some data might not be available. I would have thought that surely we would have a grip on that kind of thing. And the other observation I'd make, great where we're improving performance, but the deteriorating performance section, nearly a quarter, is too big. I mean, that's just too big. I look at it and say, this is not a particularly happy-looking chart. So that's just an observation, but my question is about the data. Why don't we have data available for some of these performance measures?
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Chief Exec?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith. I'll ask Richard Edmonds to talk specifically about the data issues. In terms of performance diminishing, clearly the majority has improved, but we have to remember that this is against the backdrop of diminishing resources. And there will be some areas which are not corporate plan priorities where we would not expect improvement because we're not resourcing improvement. So I think it's important to look at this performance against the backdrop of the things that we can't afford to fund in the way that we would wish to. That would be my only comment. But Richard, we'd like to talk about the data.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss this directly in a little more detail, but the not applicable sometimes is an issue of timing, sometimes relates to a measure that is a milestone measure, and sometimes relates to a measure that is defined by demand. So we can't set a target, therefore we're not able to report how we've done against that. It's linked directly to demand. But I'll chat to you outside if that suits.
No, I want to pursue that point. It says 40 demand-led, milestone measures, new measures, or in some cases data was unavailable. So I'm concerned about the or in some cases data was unavailable.
Perhaps that's something we can discuss outside the meeting in more detail. Yeah.
Councillor Hunt?
To come in on that specific issue, I think at the last meeting when I wasn't present, you agreed that I'd take over the role of performance management. And I think it's right in some ways that we don't accept any reds and that we're not complacent about anything that's falling. But just to emphasise that point about priorities in the current financial climates, if given reducing resources we want to prioritise some areas, and I very much hope that we do want to prioritise some areas, you know, it's easy to talk the language of priorities without acknowledging the fact that that has a result that is going to have an impact elsewhere. And if we've got fewer staff and less resources to finance everything across the council, if we try and safeguard some areas, then I think, you know, it's inevitable, if we're to be honest with people, that there will be issues in other areas. But, you know, at a general level, I accept the point that, you know, whilst there's very positive aspects to the report, we shouldn't be complacent, we shouldn't accept any red areas, and should look to meet our targets in all areas.
Okay, if there's no other member questions or comments, the recommendation is on page 259 of your agenda, that Council approves the annual report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Everyone for? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Thank you, members. The annual report is approved. Okay, agenda item 12, Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales, Draft Report 2015-16. Richard Edmonds, Head of Strategic and Democratic Services, can you present your report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Seem to be popping up different sides of the chamber at the minute. Hopefully this will be the last one. Members will be aware from having received this report previously that the IRP for Wales present on an annual basis their report and determinations around member remuneration and member support. Typically they do that by releasing a draft of what they intend to bring in for the following financial year in the autumn. Give members the opportunity to feed in any views that they may have with a view to then publishing the final report in February. It doesn't appear from Section 5, or it doesn't appear to me from Section 5 that there's much being suggested by way of change this time around. But what I wanted to do was bring to members' perspectives the fact that this report is now in the public domain, and you do have until November the 26th to make any representations that you have about its content directly to the IRP Wales at the address set out in Section 6. And in terms of the recommendations, Madam Mayor, it's simply to note the contents and note the invitation to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any questions or comments? No? All happy to note the recommendations on page 385? All those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Thank you, members. Agenda item 13, motions on notice. Councillor Lewis-Jones, Deputy Leader, can you present your motion for us, please?
Yes, I will, Madam Mayor. Before I actually speak to the motion, I'd like to give some origins of the motion. Members will be aware that the Council has had a mayor for many years, and the mayor is the ambassador of the Council and do very good service right throughout the communities of Torfaen and far beyond. And every mayor interacts with the public, and Mandy is by no means no exception. And this motion is actually her thoughts and words, but because of the Constitution, mayor is not permitted to bring forward a motion. Consequently, I'm the vehicle bringing forward the motion on the mayor's behalf, but I support it 100%. Anyway, I speak to the motion now. In Torfaen, approximately 1,100 people are living with dementia. Across Wales as a whole, more than 45,000 people are living with a condition. 2/3 of people with dementia live in the community, many on their own. 1/3 of people with dementia live in a care home. Dementia is the fastest growing condition for the over 65s. Only 42% of people living with dementia in Torfaen have received a formal diagnosis. Diagnosis is the key that unlocks access to both statutory and third sector support and services. The financial cost of dementia to the UK as a whole was estimated as being over 26 billion in 2013. Therefore, this Council resolves to 1. Work with the local communities in Torfaen to gain working to be dementia friendly. Recognise status with a view to making Torfaen the first dementia friendly county in Wales. 2. Appoint an elected member to the position of dementia champion and appoint a lead officer for dementia. 3. Work in partnership with the Nile and Bevan Health Board to continue to develop and improve services for people with dementia. 4. Encourage councillors and staff of TCBC to become a dementia friend through the Alzheimer's Society Dementia Friends Initiative. Participate in awareness-raising activities during a Dementia Awareness Week. 6. Ensure that due consideration is given to people living with dementia and their carers by including them explicitly in equality impact assessments. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I wonder, before members debated the motion, if I could just point out, in the second recommendation there, Council can't actually appoint an officer, as I think it might be suggested, but in any event, Sue Evans, the Chief Officer for Social Care and Housing, they would normally fall within her duties. So I wanted members to be aware that we already have an officer that would be able to take that forward. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Morby?
I'd like to move an amendment,
It
please.
hasn't been seconded, sorry.
Oh.
Was there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Morby?
I'd like to move an amendment that we add that the Mayor, Councillor Amanda Owen, be appointed as the member champion for dementia. And also, whilst making that amendment, to note, as Linda has already said, that Sue Evans by default is the nominated officer until such time as she nominates someone else, if she chooses to. And also to note that in terms of the wording in the motion, that unfortunately we're no longer the first authority in Wales to be dementia-friendly. Cardiff City Council has beaten us to it in that regard. But I think the sentiment is still the same, that we should note that we hope to be the second dementia-friendly designated authority in Wales. So that's my amendment, essentially.
Thank you. Is it seconded? Okay, thank you. Members, do you have any comments or questions? No? Oh, sorry.
Yes,
Councillor.
Madam Mayor, I hope you're up for it, Madam Mayor. Because if you can confirm you are, then I'm content to support the amendment and the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley?
I very much congratulate you on the position. I have some experience this myself. I actually used to run the South Glamorgan years ago, Alzheimer's Disease Society. So it's something when I was experienced with, and certainly if we're pioneering that here, I'd like to hear that. But the other thing I would like to say, because David and I help support it, is the Torvine Carers Centre, which obviously deals with a lot of this, because a lot of the burden, and I'm sure Sue would say this, falls on carers. And for every dementia sufferer, there's probably one or a lot more carers doing informal care, because unfortunately in the nature of things these days, it's the informal carer which takes the burden. And I think that's probably something that everybody in this room, probably relatives or people they know, they recognise that. The other thing is to say that it's not just an old person's complaint, because if you see young people with dementia, that is something that is not as prevalent as it might be. And unfortunately, and I'm not a medical person, but there some of the aspects of things like alcohol and drugs mean that we're probably saving up forms of dementia that we do not know about. And it's one of the alarming things. I'm not going to say any more about that, but there is some evidence to suggest that might be the case in future. So that's something we really don't want to know about. And there's some very good positive role models about people with dementia who are taking on dementia themselves and doing a different model. I'm referring obviously to Terry Pratchett, but there are other people taking it on. I wish you luck in the role.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
It's very apt that this is brought before Council today. I don't know if anybody saw the BBC News this morning. Wales's lead consultant, I think actual only consultant on dementia, was on the television this morning explaining about the problem, how this is, and that it should be brought into the community, because a number of people with dementia are ending up in our hospitals, which is not the most appropriate environment for them and a very costly environment for them. I'm happy to support Brian's amendment, not to be pernickety, but I'm sure he meant Mandy Owen in her own right, but not as her role as the Mayor, because I would like to see Mandy continue this role when she comes out of the chair. She's a passionate person on this. She's brought it to me with my executive role on numerous occasions, and I couldn't think of anybody better in the council to fulfil that role, and I wish her every luck and my support in that role to her.
Yeah, sorry, that was my intention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, likewise, I'm very happy to support this motion, and as Richard said, I did see the news this morning relating to the people that are in hospital, tying up beds where they could be better suited in other accommodation. We all know that dementia seems to be increasing. There's a lot of people in our own community that hasn't been diagnosed, and I welcome this motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Rees?
Yeah, I'm happy to support the amendment brought in by Councillor Morby. Dementia is probably one of the biggest political challenges we are going to face as a country going forward. I want to thank you for putting down this marker today and making us all aware of what we need to be thinking about.
Thank you. Members, any other comments? No? Okay, so we're going to vote on the amendment. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, members. Okay, we're going to vote on the substantive amended motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, members. Move on to agenda item 14, member question time. Before we go into member question time, I'd like to remind you that we have a question, it's answered, but then we have a supplementary question which must relate to either the question or the answer, okay? So, first question, Councillor Karen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With regards to the recent ruling by the Wales Traffic Commissioner concerning a local bus operator, could the Executive Member for Education inform the Council of Could the Executive Member for Education inform the Council of procedures in place for awarding school transport contracts and what safeguards have been put in place to prevent a repeat of this incident?
Councillor David Jowell, try to answer the question.
Thanks for that question, Councillor Karen. Transport contracts are awarded through a competitive tendering process. They are subject to the operator providing appropriate and up-to-date information in relation to the vehicle to be used and the driver and escort, if appropriate, to be employed. Operators cannot start the contract until all the relevant information has been verified and are required to sign the contract to confirm they have read and understood the terms and conditions. This includes schedules relating to service provision, the operator's licence conditions, general transport conditions for drivers and escorts, general transport vehicle conditions, withheld payment provision, and the Council's own contract monitoring programme. 6 monthly checks are undertaken with operators so that we know what staff and vehicles are registered with operators. With regard to vehicles, valid insurance, tax and MOT certificates must be provided. For drivers, appropriate and current licences, any disclosures and barring service, previously CRB checks, must be provided. If operators employ any additional drivers and escorts between the 6 monthly checks, they must contact us for the appropriate checks to be carried out. Contracts are also monitored reactively and proactively to ensure compliance with the terms and conditions, and if there are concerns about an operator and or the safety of a vehicle, we can refer these to the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency, the DVSA, formerly VOSA. The DVSA is responsible for setting, testing and enforcing driver and vehicle standards, and it can refer matters on for consideration by the Traffic Commissioners, who ultimately licence and regulate public service vehicle operators, as was the case in this instance.
Any supplementary? No. Okay, thank you. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is vehicle tracking fitted on all Torfaen County Borough Council owned vehicles? Is it fully operational on all vehicles it is fitted to?
Okay, I believe Councillor Richard Clark is going to answer this question.
In the absence of Councillor Cunningham, I am Councillor Burnett. Thank you for the question. I seem to get your questions recently, but there we are. I'll be kind this time. On October the 16th, there were 178 vehicles over 35 departments belonging to the council. Of those, 176 are fitted with trackers. The only two that aren't are two gritters, and before the winter gritting programme comes into being, those two will be included in that. Departmental managers have access to the online system to allow daily monitoring and the utilisation of vehicles. So 178 vehicles, 176 have trackers. By the winter season, 178 will.
Is there a supplementary, Councillor Burnett?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor, thank you. If the gully sucker has a tracker from the data, could you let me know in the near future where the gully sucker was on the day of the 22nd of the flood, where it was throughout that day, please?
I won't, but I'm sure John Cunningham and his team will.
I'm sure he will. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, re the recent announcement that the Chief Officer is moving on to pastures new, and can I at this point wish her well in the new position? Will this Council be considering realigning her workload to make cost savings to this authority?
Leader, would you like to answer the
Yes, thanks so
question?
much, Madam Mayor. I'm sure Councillor Evans will appreciate that whenever a senior member of staff leaves the authority, detailed discussions take place between myself, the Chief Executive and the Cabinet members on the most appropriate way of dealing with the change. As Christina will not be leaving until the end of the year, we have time available over the autumn to make sure that the decisions we make provides the best platform from which the Council could move forward.
Thank you. We've got a supplementary.
Yes, please, Madam Mayor. Can I be asked to have that information provided me once that decision has been taken?
Information.
Can I have the decision when it is arrived at, given out to me and perhaps all members?
Well, when it does happen, we'll have a debate in this chamber as a report back on what we consider to be our appropriate moves, given that Christina is gone.
Thank you for that, Leader.
If you want to, it's entirely up to you.
No, thank you for that.
Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Would Councillor Cunningham give a statement in regard to why the pollinators planted across Torvine this year has been so unsuccessful, and whether the money invested in this particular project has been well spent?
Leader, would you like to come and answer this
Can I ask
question?
Councillor Kent to enlarge on that a bit? What does he mean by a failure? And then I'll answer the question.
Up until last week, when I viewed them, I couldn't see any flowers or minimal amount of flowers that I was expecting.
I'm going to deviate from the norm here. Normally, the answers to these questions are compiled by me with officers. They did compile them. I didn't accept it as what I consider to be the case, and now I'll give him my version. First of all, let me just say, the pollinating project had nothing to do with officers. It was a concept developed by members. Stuart Ashley, myself, and David Daniels. Where did the ideas come from? Some of us had seen it in various different places. I seen it, for instance, when I took my grandson to Chepstow for his birthday. Then we passed from that big roundabout all the way into Chepstow and viewed a magnificent show. Other members had seen it in other places. What followed on from then was that we had a seminar here and we discussed the matter, and all members felt it was a good idea. What followed on from that was discussions with officers, including Bronhaven staff, in terms of types of flowers and various. So there was extensive discussions that we had. The key issue, and as far as I'm concerned, the only thing we agreed as a council, was that we would concentrate on the road right up the valley from Malpas to Blenavon, on the main road. That's what the decision was made, and that's what they were instructed to do. I was mindful of the fact that there were people that wanted pollinating flowers up on various different places around the ward. I gave strict instructions to the officers that they should concentrate on the main road going up through the valley, because we wanted to convince the public that this is a good idea and look what we could do. And we could have eventually moved up into the other wards and so on. So they didn't do that. They done the complete opposite, actually, to what the instructions was. And I need the senior officer to actually look at that in detail, because they were definitely instructed to concentrate on the valley. Now then, when you say was it a success, where they planted them, yes, it was a success in most areas. And let me just say that we want more of it. And I hope that we're going to continue it this year, because it's a good concept, and the response we've had from the public in those areas where they were planted was that it was brilliant. So I hope we're going to agree this year to extend that. But this year, I will be sitting down with Stuart Ashley and the officers concerned, and we will do a detailed map jointly in terms of where the pollination flowers should be put. And the concentration must be right up through the valley from Malpas to another consideration. Because let me just explain. There were members that had pollinating flowers in their areas, but there were other members that didn't have pollinating flowers in their areas. And that wasn't the instruction. So that's what we're going to do this year. We'll sit down with a map, with the officers, we'll agree on it, I'll bring the map to the council, and then we'll plant them where we said.
Real supplementary?
I do, Madam Mayor. I think you partly answered it, but I'll read it anyway. Knowing the disappointment display of pollinators, particularly on Cumbrain Drive, and with the impending discussion shortly to take place in regarding departmental budget savings for 2015-16, as executive member for neighbourhoods or the leader, would you recommend that no further finances be spent in regarding Torfaen County Borough Council pollinators before guaranteeing continued employment of Torfaen County Borough Council staff, i.e. putting staff before flowers?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rees?
Diolch, Matt. This is for Councillor Yowell. With regard to post-16 education provision in Torfaen, recently Julie James, the Deputy Minister for Skills and Technology, stated that her predecessor had met with Torfaen Local Authority, Coleg Gwent and Leiden Eagle AM on a number of occasions to discuss developments in Torfaen. Progress had been slow, and it was important for any future plans to be deliverable by all the partners. Simply, after all this time, when and how will post-16 education for the English medium sector be provided equitably for young people wherever they live in the borough?
Councillor Yowell?
Yeah. Once again, Councillor Rees, thank you very much for the question. The Council has already taken the decision that a tertiary college is the preferred option to provide post-16 education for Torfaen in the future. The governance model would be led by Coleg Gwent, and we are currently in discussions with both them and the Welsh Government as to an appropriate site. Of course, any site must be suitable for a college providing both academic and vocational post-16 learning. The removal of existing sixth forms would naturally follow such an initiative, and this would necessitate an extensive consultation process. Such developments, of course, need time to deliberate on and implement. It will be our intention, therefore, to talk with the relevant schools about what needs to be put in place in the interim.
Supplementary, Councillor Rees? No? Thank you. Councillor Haynes?
Thank you very much. My question is about the income generating schemes. I was a big supporter of this idea when it was first brought to, I believe, cleaner communities a number of years ago. The question is, in the last few years, neighbourhood services have started a number of income generating schemes. How much has been raised through these schemes?
I believe Councillor Hunt is going to answer this question.
Okay, I'll answer on behalf of Councillor Cunningham. It's important to confirm that the department has not generated income per se, as this can only be achieved through a separate company. However, we are able to cover our costs through charging for services. This is the approach the department has taken through some successful initiatives. These include the MOT station, which produced a cost saving and staff efficiency saving through providing our own MOTs rather than seeking them externally. Cost recovery in this area has amounted to £4,000 since its opening earlier this year. Another example of where cost recovery has been successful is through the sponsored roundabout scheme, which has brought in on average £50,000 per annum since its inception.
Supplementary, Councillor Haynes?
Not a supplementary, but just congratulations on both successful schemes. They're wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, how much does the Council spend each year on the publication and distribution of paper format service area annual documents to include reports, dictionaries, directories, information booklets, etc.? The executive member's response should include a breakdown of each document produced and the cost incurred per service area. And this is an example.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. The Councillor's question is a reasonable one, but it would not have been possible to provide the level of detail that Councillor Kemp seeks by today. However, I thought that it important, particularly with budget discussions underway, to commission a detailed analysis of the costs of printing and distributing hard copy documents broken down by each service area. I've also asked that the exercise identify which documents the organisation is required to produce and which we have produced by choice. I will circulate the findings of this exercise in full and in writing to Councillor Kemp and all other members as soon as it's concluded.
Thank you. Have you got any supplementary?
I do, and again, it's been partly answered by the executive member. My question is, although it is recognised that such documents contain important information, the question that needs to be asked is, due to the cost of publication and distribution of hard copy annual documents, should the Council only be producing them once every 2 years, or even better, only have them accessible by way of the Council's website, thereby saving the Council potentially thousands of pounds each year?
Okay, it's a relevant question to ask, especially in times we're in financially. However, I refer back to my point, there's certain documents we're required to produce by law, and obviously we can't stop producing them, otherwise we'd be in trouble. But the point he makes is a valid one.
Councillor Rees.
Again, for Councillor Hunt. The Children's Commissioner recently stated that children and their rights should be considered when councils consider the impact of budget decisions. How is the Executive Member for Resources going to ensure this happens?
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can start by accepting the premise of the question, because I think it's a valid one, that as a council we should do all we can to minimise the impact of budget decisions on the rights of children. You can have my word that in my role I'll do all I can to meet that expectation, as I'm sure will other members of the Cabinet, scrutiny committees and members as we consider the forthcoming budget over the next few months. As a council, we've honoured the Welsh Government's pledge to raise school spending in each of the last 2 years, meaning our schools have more money to spend on educating our young people, an example of how we can work with other public bodies to deliver for children. In our budget discussions, within Cabinet discussions and scrutiny committees, we often question the impact of proposed savings measures on particular groups of residents, whether they are young people, older people, those with disabilities or other groups of people. When setting our budget, we will also be very aware of all our equality impact duties. The Equalities Act requires sufficient and timely consideration of the possible implications of changes, and as in previous years, a full equalities impact assessment will form part of our final budget report and will set out the specific steps we've taken to try and minimise impacts. However, whilst the Children's Commissioner's comments are timely, I suggest he's perhaps quite relieved not to have to take the sort of decisions we face in local government thanks to cuts from the UK Government. As there is £1.5 billion less to spend in public services in Wales compared to when David Cameron took office in 2010, difficult choices are inevitable. To make the necessary savings, it's unfortunately impossible to avoid any impact on children and young people. The key is that we use our judgment to ensure that we take the least worst options possible for our younger residents and take every opportunity we can as a council to step in to help out when UK Government policy disadvantages them.
Supplementary? No. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Anticipating a one-word answer to this one. Is there an advertising and editorial policy in relation to council advertising, particularly in relation to Torfaen Talks?
Leader.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's not a specific editorial policy for Torfaen Talks. Torfaen Talks is part of the Council's agreed communication strategy and adheres to the Code of Recommended Practice of Local Authority Publicity. Our local editorial process is consistent with the Code and internally agreed protocols.
Supplementary? No. Thank you.
Can I add then, if there's no supplementary, that the way Torfaen Talks works actually is that the officers devise the content. It's then sent to myself, to the Chief Executive and to Councillor Haynes to look at before it's released.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to agenda item 15, date of next meeting. Members, we've had notification that there will be an extraordinary council on the 25th of November at 11:30, where we'll talk about expressing an interest in merging with Blaenau Gwent. Agenda item 16, Cabinet decisions of the 7th of October. Members, the Cabinet decisions start on page 389 of the agenda. There were no challenges to the decisions. Do members have any questions on any of the decisions? No? All okay to note the decisions? Yeah. Thank you, members. The Cabinet decisions are noted. That's the end of the Council meeting. Thank you. And can I remind you to sign in any declarations in the attendance book if you haven't already done so? Thank you.